Sarah Johnson sat on her tiny apartment floor, staring at the open suitcase in complete shock. Her hands trembled as she lifted out a designer watch that probably cost more than her yearly rent. This wasn't her suitcase. This wasn't her life. Where were her work uniforms? Where were her baby's diapers? Where was everything she owned in this world? The flight from Chicago to New York had been a nightmare from the start. Little Emma had cried for 2 hours straight while other passengers shot Sarah dirty looks. She'd barely managed to grab her luggage from the carousel before rushing to catch the last bus home. Now, sitting in her cramped studio apartment at midnight, she realized her worst fear had come true. Someone else had her suitcase. Someone else had the only possessions she'd managed to pack when she fled her old life 3 months ago. Someone else had Emma's favorite teddy bear, the one thing that could calm her down when nothing else worked. Someone else had the last photo of her mother, the only family Sarah had left in this world. Sarah's heart pounded as she pulled out item after item that screamed wealth and luxury. Expensive cologne bottles, silk ties, a laptop that looked like it cost more than her car, and business cards for companies she'd only seen in commercials. Everything was neat, organized, and clean, the complete opposite of her chaotic, messy life. Emma stirred in her crib across the room, and Sarah quickly closed the suitcase to avoid waking her. She couldn't afford another sleepless night. She had to work 3 jobs just to keep this tiny apartment, and tomorrow she needed to be at the diner by 5 in the morning. But how could she work when her uniform was in someone else's hands? She looked around her sparse apartment. A mattress on the floor, a second-hand crib, a small table with 2 mismatched chairs, and a mini fridge that barely kept food cold. This was all she had managed to build after leaving Detroit with nothing but Emma and a dream of starting over. Now even that little bit of security felt like it was slipping away. Sarah picked up her phone and stared at the cracked screen. She had $12 in her checking account and no credit cards. The suitcase mix-up wasn't just inconvenient, it was a disaster that could destroy the fragile new life she was trying to build. She opened the suitcase again and found a business card at the bottom. James Mitchell, CEO, Mitchell Enterprises. The address was in Manhattan, in one of those glass towers she'd seen on TV shows about rich people. This man probably made more money in a day than she made in a year. What would someone like that think of her? A single mother living in a studio apartment in Queens, working as a waitress, a house cleaner, and a grocery store cashier just to survive. He probably had assistants to handle problems like this. He probably wouldn't even notice his suitcase was missing until someone told him. But Sarah noticed. She noticed because losing her suitcase meant losing everything. It meant not having her work clothes, not having Emma's supplies, not having the small things that made their life possible. It meant being reminded once again that she was just one mistake away from having nothing at all. She pulled out a folder from the expensive suitcase and found papers for business deals worth millions of dollars. There were contracts, financial statements, and legal documents that she couldn't even understand. This man's world was so different from hers that they might as well be from different planets. Sarah closed her eyes and tried not to cry. She'd promised herself she wouldn't cry anymore after leaving Emma's father. She'd promised herself she was strong enough to handle anything. But sitting here at midnight, surrounded by a stranger's expensive things while her own life was scattered somewhere in New York City, she felt more alone than ever. Emma made a soft sound in her sleep, and Sarah looked over at her beautiful daughter. Emma was the reason for everything, the reason Sarah had left Detroit, the reason she worked so hard, the reason she couldn't give up. But Emma was also the reason this suitcase mix-up was so scary. Sarah didn't just have herself to worry about. She had a baby who depended on her for everything. The expensive watch caught the light from her single lamp, and Sarah realized it was probably worth more than everything she owned combined. She could sell it and have enough money to live comfortably for months. But that would make her a thief, and she'd promised herself she would never become the kind of person who took things that didn't belong to them. She carefully packed everything back into the suitcase and zipped it closed. Tomorrow she would find a way to contact James Mitchell. Tomorrow she would get her own suitcase back and return to her normal life. Tonight she would try to sleep and hope that somewhere in this big city, a wealthy businessman was treating her simple belongings with the same care she was showing his expensive ones. But deep down, Sarah knew this was just the beginning of something that would change her life forever. She just didn't know if it would change it for better or worse. Sarah woke up to Emma's crying at 4 in the morning. She'd only slept for 3 hours, but her mind immediately went to the suitcase problem. She had to be at work in an hour and she didn't have her uniform. She didn't have Emma's formula. She didn't have anything. She picked up Emma and tried to calm her down, but without the familiar teddy bear, nothing worked. Emma's cries got louder and more desperate, and Sarah felt her own panic rising. Her neighbors were already complaining about the noise, and she couldn't afford to get kicked out of this apartment. "Shug, baby mama's here," Sarah whispered, bouncing Emma gently. But Emma knew something was wrong. Babies always knew. Sarah looked through her tiny closet for something to wear to work. She found an old t-shirt and jeans, but they were wrinkled and had stains from when Emma had thrown up last week. She couldn't serve customers looking like this, but she couldn't afford to miss work either. She tried calling her boss at the diner, but it went straight to voicemail. Sarah left a message explaining about the suitcase mix-up, but she knew how it sounded. It sounded like an excuse, and her boss had heard plenty of those from employees who didn't show up. Emma was still crying, and Sarah realized she didn't have any clean bottles either. Everything was in the other suitcase: the bottles, the formula, the extra clothes, the diapers. She had maybe 6 diapers left and no money to buy more until payday. Sarah sat down on her mattress and tried to think. She could borrow money from her neighbor, but Mrs. Rodriguez was struggling too. She could try to return some things to the store, but she didn't have receipts for anything. She could call her sister in Detroit, but they hadn't spoken since Sarah left, and she'd promised herself she would never ask for help again. The business card sat on her small table, staring at her. James Mitchell, CO. This man had her life in his hands, and he probably didn't even know it. He probably hadn't even opened her suitcase yet. He probably had people who unpacked for him. Sarah picked up her phone and stared at the number on the business card. It was 6 in the morning. What kind of person called a CEO at 6 in the morning? But what choice did she have? She couldn't wait for business hours when her whole life was falling apart. She dialed the number, her hands shaking. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a professional voice answered. "Mitchell Enterprises, how may I help you?" Hi," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need to speak to James Mitchell. It's about his suitcase. Mr. Mitchell is not available at this time. May I take a message?" Sarah's heart sank. Of course he wasn't available. Rich people didn't answer their own phones at 6 in the morning. "This is really important," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "We accidentally switched suitcases on a flight yesterday, and I really need to get mine back." "I'll pass along the message, miss. What's your contact information?" Sarah gave her name and phone number, but she could tell the person on the other end didn't think this was important. To them, it was just another message for their boss. To Sarah, it was everything. After she hung up, Emma finally stopped crying and fell back asleep. But Sarah couldn't rest. She had to figure out what to do about work. She couldn't afford to lose any of her jobs, but she also couldn't work without the right clothes and supplies. She looked through James Mitchell's suitcase again, hoping to find something that might help. Maybe there was a personal phone number or an address where she could find him. But everything was business-related. This man's personal life was as organized and separate as everything else about him. Sarah tried calling the diner again, and this time her boss answered. "Sarah? Where are you? Your shift started 20 minutes ago." "I'm so sorry, Mr. Garcia. I had a problem with my luggage on my flight yesterday, and I don't have my uniform." "That's not my problem, Sarah. You know we're short-staffed. If you can't make it in, I'll have to find someone who can." Sarah's stomach dropped. She couldn't lose this job. It was her main source of income. "Please, I'll be there in an hour. I'll wear something else, and I promise I'll have my uniform tomorrow." There was a long pause. 1 hour, Sarah. And this better not happen again. Sarah hung up and quickly got dressed in her cleanest clothes. She grabbed Emma and the diaper bag, but then realized she didn't have enough diapers to last through her shift. She didn't have bottles or formula either. She couldn't take Emma to work without supplies. She knocked on Mrs. Rodriguez's door, feeling embarrassed and desperate. "Sarah? What's wrong, Mija? I'm so sorry to bother you this early. I had a problem with my luggage and I don't have Emma's things. Could I borrow some formula and diapers? I'll pay you back on Friday." Mrs. Rodriguez looked at Sarah's worried face and immediately went to get supplies. She came back with a bag full of baby items. "Don't worry about paying me back," she said kindly. "We mothers have to help each other." Sarah felt tears in her eyes. "Thank you so much. I don't know what I would do without you. You would figure it out like you always do. You're stronger than you think, Mija." Sarah hugged Mrs. Rodriguez and rushed to catch the bus to work. But as she sat on the crowded bus with Emma sleeping in her arms, she couldn't stop thinking about the suitcase. Somewhere in New York City was a man who had everything she owned, and she had no idea when she would get it back. The bus jerked to a stop and Sarah saw her reflection in the window. She looked tired, worried, and completely out of place among the business people heading to their office jobs. But she also saw something else: determination. She was going to find James Mitchell, get her suitcase back and somehow make this work. She just hoped he was looking for her too. By noon, Sarah had spilled coffee on her borrowed apron twice, mixed up 3 orders and nearly dropped a tray of food. Her mind wasn't on work at all. Every time her phone buzzed, she hoped it was someone calling about the suitcase. During her break, she sat in the diner's back alley with Emma and tried calling Mitchell Enterprises again. This time she got a different person. Good afternoon, Mitchell Enterprises. Hi, I called this morning about a suitcase mix-up with Mr. Mitchell. Did he get my message? Let me check. Yes, I see a note here. Mr. Mitchell is in meetings all day, but I can schedule you for an appointment next week. Next week? Sarah's voice cracked. I can't wait next week. I need my suitcase back today. It has all my work clothes and my baby's things. I understand your concern, but Mr. Mitchell's schedule is completely booked. The earliest I can fit you in is Tuesday at 3 p.m. Sarah looked down at Emma, who was chewing on her fingers because she didn't have her teething toys. Please, isn't there any way I could speak to him today? Just for 5 minutes? I'm sorry, but that's impossible. Should I put you down for Tuesday? Sarah wanted to scream. This man had her entire life, and she had to wait a week for a 5-minute conversation? Yes, put me down for Tuesday, she said finally. But please tell him it's urgent. After work, Sarah took the subway to Manhattan with Emma. She knew it was crazy, but she had to try something. She found the address on James Mitchell's business card and stood outside the glass tower, looking up at 40 floors of offices. The building was intimidating, all chrome and glass and marble. People in expensive suits walked in and out like they owned the world. Sarah looked down at her stained jeans and wrinkled t-shirt and felt completely out of place. She walked into the lobby with Emma in her arms. The security guard looked at her suspiciously. Can I help you? I need to see James Mitchell. It's about his suitcase. Do you have an appointment? No, but it's an emergency. We accidentally switched suitcases and I really need to get mine back. The security guard looked at her like she was crazy. Ma'am, you can't just walk in here without an appointment. Mr. Mitchell is the CEO of this company. I know, but please, I just need 5 minutes. I have his suitcase and he has mine. You'll need to go through proper channels. Call his office and schedule an appointment. Sarah felt tears starting to form. I already did that. They can't see me until next week. The security guard's expression softened slightly when he saw Emma reaching for his badge. Look, I understand you have a problem, but I can't just let people up to see the CEO. It doesn't work that way. Sarah nodded and turned to leave, but then she had an idea. She pulled out her phone and took a picture of the lobby, then posted it on social media with a message, looking for James Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell Enterprises. We accidentally switched suitcases on flight 447 from Chicago yesterday. I have yours, you have mine. Please contact me ASAP. It was a long shot, but maybe someone who knew him would see it and help. On the subway ride home, Sarah's phone rang. Unknown number. Hello. Is this Sarah Johnson? The voice was deep, professional, and slightly confused. Sarah's heart started racing. Yes, this is Sarah. This is James Mitchell. I believe you have my suitcase. Relief flooded through Sarah's body. Yes, I do. And you have mine. Thank God you called. I'm sorry it took so long. I just got back from meetings and saw all the messages from my office. They said it was urgent. Yes, it is. I have all my work clothes in that suitcase and my baby's things. I need them back. There was a pause. Your baby's things? Yes, I'm a single mother. Everything Emma needs is in that suitcase. Another pause. I see. Well, we need to meet and exchange them. Are you available tonight? Sarah looked at Emma, who was getting fussy on the crowded subway. Yes, anytime. Where do you want to meet? Do you know Bryant Park? There's a coffee shop on the corner. I can find it. Let's say 7 o'clock. How will I recognize you? Sarah looked down at herself, tired, stressed, holding a baby. I'll be the one with the baby in your suitcase. James laughed, and it was a nice sound. Fair enough. I'll see you at 7. After he hung up, Sarah felt like she could breathe again. Finally, she was going to get her life back. She had 4 hours to get home, feed Emma, and make herself look presentable for meeting as CEO. But as the subway pulled into her station, Sarah realized she was nervous for a different reason. She was about to meet the man whose suitcase she'd been living with for the past day. She'd seen his clothes, his business papers, his personal items. She felt like she knew him somehow, even though they'd never met. What would he think of her? What would he think of her simple clothes and her struggling life? What would he think of her tiny apartment and her baby? Sarah shook her head. It didn't matter what he thought. She just needed to get her suitcase back and return to her normal life. This was just a business transaction, nothing more. But as she climbed the stairs out of the subway station, she couldn't shake the feeling that this meeting was going to change everything. Sarah arrived at Bryant Park 15 minutes early, her stomach churning with nerves. She'd changed clothes 3 times before settling on her nicest jeans and a clean sweater. Emma was dressed in her best outfit too, though Sarah wasn't sure why that mattered. The coffee shop was busy with after-work crowds, and Sarah found a table near the window where she could watch for James Mitchell. She had no idea what he looked like, but she imagined someone older, maybe with gray hair and an expensive suit. At exactly 7 o'clock, a man walked into the coffee shop and looked around. He was younger than Sarah had expected, maybe in his early 30s with dark hair and kind eyes. He was tall and well-dressed, but not in the stuffy way she'd imagined. When he saw her with Emma and the suitcase, he smiled and walked over. "Sarah?" "Yes, hi." Sarah stood up, juggling Emma and feeling suddenly self-conscious. "I'm James." He extended his hand, then seemed to realize she had her hands full. "Sorry, let me help with that." He gestured to the suitcase and Sarah felt a rush of relief as she handed it over. "Thank you so much for meeting me. I was so worried." "Don't worry about it. I'm just sorry it took so long to connect." James looked at Emma, who was staring at him with wide eyes. "And who is this beautiful girl?" "This is Emma. She's 10 months old." "Hi, Emma." James spoke softly to the baby, and Emma surprised Sarah by reaching out toward him. "She's gorgeous." Sarah felt her cheeks warm. "Thank you." She's usually shy with strangers. James sat down across from Sarah, and she noticed he didn't seem to be in a hurry to leave. "So, your suitcase is in my car outside. But first, can I buy you a coffee? You look like you've had a long day." Sarah hesitated. She needed to get home and start getting ready for her evening shift at the grocery store, but something about James made her want to stay. Just a quick coffee would be nice. James went to the counter and came back with 2 coffees and a cookie, which he broke in half and offered to share. Sarah realized she hadn't eaten since her break at the diner. "So, single mother, 3 jobs?" James said, stirring his coffee. "That can't be easy." Sarah looked at him in surprise. "How did you know about the 3 jobs?" "Your suitcase. I hope you don't mind, but I had to look through it to figure out who it belonged to. I saw the uniforms." Sarah felt embarrassed. Her worn work uniforms must have looked so shabby compared to his expensive clothes. "I don't mind. I looked through yours too. I hope that's okay." "Of course. Find anything interesting?" Sarah smiled despite herself. "You're very organized. And you have expensive taste." James laughed. "My assistant does most of the organizing. And yes, I suppose I do spend too much on clothes." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, and Sarah found herself studying James's face. He wasn't what she'd expected at all. He seemed normal, approachable, almost humble. "Can I ask you something?" James said suddenly. "Sure. How do you do it? Work 3 jobs and take care of a baby?" Sarah looked down at Emma, who had fallen asleep in her arms. "You just do what you have to do. Emma comes first, everything else comes second." "But don't you ever get tired? Don't you ever want to just stop?" There was something in James's voice that made Sarah look at him more carefully. "Of course I get tired. But stopping isn't an option when you have someone depending on you." James nodded slowly. "I admire that. I really do. What about you? Being a CEO must be stressful." "It is, but it's different. When I'm tired, I can take a vacation. When I'm stressed, I can delegate. You don't have those options." Sarah was surprised by his honesty. Everyone has their own struggles. Maybe, but some struggles are harder than others. James looked at Emma sleeping peacefully. "She's lucky to have you." Sarah felt tears threatening again. She wasn't used to people understanding her situation, let alone praising her for it. "I should get going," she said, standing up. "I have to work tonight." "Of course. Let me get your suitcase." They walked outside together, and James led her to a black car parked at the curb. He opened the trunk and pulled out her familiar, battered suitcase. "Here you go. Everything should be in there." Sarah took the suitcase and felt like she was getting her life back. "Thank you so much. I really can't tell you how much this means to me." "No problem at all." James paused, then seemed to make a decision. "Sarah, can I ask you something else?" "Yes." "Would you like to have dinner sometime? I mean, just as friends? I'd like to get to know you better." Sarah stared at him in shock. Asio was asking her to dinner? I don't think that's a good idea." "Why not?" Sarah gestured between them. "Because we're from completely different worlds. You're a CEO and I'm a waitress with a baby. What would we possibly have in common? We could find out. Sarah shook her head. I appreciate the offer, but I don't have time for dating. I barely have time to sleep. James looked disappointed but nodded. I understand. But if you ever change your mind, you have my number now. As Sarah walked away with her suitcase, she could feel James watching her. Part of her wanted to turn around and say yes to dinner, but the practical part of her brain knew it would never work. Men like James Mitchell didn't date women like her. And women like her didn't have time for fairy tales. But as she rode the subway home, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the way James had looked at Emma, or the way he'd listened when she talked about her struggles. For just a few minutes, she'd felt like someone understood her life. It was a dangerous feeling, and Sarah knew she needed to forget about it as quickly as possible. 3 days later, Sarah was rushing to her morning shift at the diner when her phone rang. A known number again. Hello? Sarah? It's James Mitchell. Sarah stopped walking. Oh, hi. Is everything okay? Did I leave something in your suitcase? No, everything's fine. I wanted to check on you and Emma. Make sure you got everything sorted out. Sarah found herself smiling despite her hurry. We're good, thank you. I made it to work on time the next day. Good, I'm glad. There was a pause. Sarah, I have a question for you. Okay. Do you know anything about event planning? Sarah almost laughed. Event planning? No, why would I know about event planning? My company is hosting a charity dinner next week and my assistant just quit. I'm drowning in details I don't understand and I thought maybe, well, you seem like someone who's good at organizing things. James, I organize my life around 3 work schedules and a baby's nap times. That's not the same as planning fancy dinners. But you make it work, don't you? You keep all those pieces together? Sarah wasn't sure where this was going. I guess so. Would you consider helping me? Just for a week. I'd pay you well and you could bring Emma. It would be during the day so you wouldn't have to give up your other jobs. Sarah stopped walking completely. Are you offering me a job? A temporary job. 1 week, good pay, flexible hours. What do you say? Sarah's first instinct was to say no. She didn't know anything about charity dinners or corporate events. But then she thought about her empty checking account and the rent that was due next week. How much does it pay? James named a figure that made Sarah's eyes widen. It was more than she made in 2 weeks at all 3 jobs combined. Are you serious? Completely serious. Sarah, you managed to track me down in a city of 8 million people. You organized your life around 3 jobs and a baby. You're exactly the kind of person I need. Sarah felt dizzy. This couldn't be real. James, I don't have experience with corporate events. I don't even own nice clothes for that kind of work. We'll figure out the clothes. As for experience, sometimes fresh eyes are exactly what you need. Sarah thought about Emma's upcoming doctor appointment that she couldn't afford. She thought about the groceries she'd been putting off buying. She thought about the constant stress of never having enough money. When would I start? Today if you're available. Sarah looked at her phone. She was supposed to be at the diner in 10 minutes. I have to work. Call in sick. I can't call in sick. I'll lose my job. Sarah, this 1 week will pay you more than a month at the diner. Take the risk. Sarah closed her eyes and made a decision that scared her. Okay. I'll do it. Really? Really? But if this turns out to be some kind of joke? It's not a joke. Can you be at my office in an hour? Sarah looked down at her diner uniform. I need to go home and change first. Don't worry about that. Just come as you are. An hour later, Sarah stood in the lobby of Mitchell Enterprises with Emma in her arms, feeling completely out of place. The same security guard from before looked at her in surprise. Ma'am? You're back. I have an appointment with Mr. Mitchell. The security guard checked his computer and looked even more surprised. Go right up. 40th floor. The elevator ride to the 40th floor felt like it took forever. Sarah bounced Emma gently and tried to calm her own nerves. What was she doing here? She was a waitress, not a corporate executive. The elevator doors opened to reveal a sleek reception area with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A young man behind the desk looked up when Sarah approached. You must be Sarah. Mr. Mitchell is waiting for you in his office. James's office was bigger than Sarah's entire apartment. One wall was all windows, giving a breathtaking view of Manhattan. James was standing by the windows when she entered, but he turned and smiled when he saw her. Sarah, you came. I'm here, but I still think you're crazy. James walked over and looked at Emma, who was taking in all the news sites with wide eyes. How's she doing? She's fine. She likes new places. Sarah looked around the impressive office. This is incredible. It's just an office. Come on, let me show you what we're dealing with. James led Sarah to a conference table covered with papers, folders, and what looked like complete chaos. This is everything for the charity dinner. Guest lists, catering menus, seating charts, entertainment options. My assistant organized it all, and then she left without explaining any of it. Sarah set Emma down in her carrier and looked at the mess of papers. Despite her nerves, she felt her organizing instincts kick in. Okay, first question. When is this dinner? Next Friday. Next Friday? That's 6 days away. I know. Sarah picked up a folder labeled Catering and flipped through it. Have you confirmed the catering? I think so. Sarah found the catering contract and saw it wasn't signed. James, this isn't confirmed. You need to sign this and send it back today, or you won't have food at your dinner. Oh, that's not good. Sarah was already reaching for her phone. What's the catering company's number? As Sarah spent the next hour making phone calls and organizing papers, she started to feel more confident. This wasn't so different from juggling her 3 jobs. It was just about keeping track of details and making sure everything got done on time. You're amazing at this, James said, watching her work. It's just organization. You make lists, you check things off, you follow up. Sarah looked up from the seating chart she was fixing. James, can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you really offer me this job? And don't say it's because I'm good at organizing. James sat down across from her. Honestly? Because when I met you the other night, I realized I haven't met anyone real in a very long time. Everyone in my world wants something from me, or they're afraid of me, or they're trying to impress me. But you just talked to me like I was a normal person. Sarah felt her cheeks flush. You are a normal person. Not in my world, I'm not. In my world, I'm a CEO with more money than I know what to do with and no real friends. That sounds lonely. It is lonely. James looked out the window at the city below. When I saw how hard you work, how much you care about Emma, how you never give up even when things are impossible, I wanted to help. And maybe I wanted to be around someone who reminded me what real life looks like. Sarah didn't know what to say. She'd never thought of herself as someone who could remind anyone of anything important. Well, she said finally, let's get this charity dinner organized. That's what you're paying me for. James smiled. Yes, ma'am. As they worked together for the rest of the day, Sarah found herself relaxing around James. He was funny, smart, and surprisingly down-to-earth for a CEO. When Emma got fussy, he held her while Sarah made phone calls. When Sarah needed supplies, he sent his driver to get them. By the end of the day, the charity dinner was looking much more organized, and Sarah was starting to think she might actually be able to pull this off. Same time tomorrow? James asked as Sarah packed up to leave. Same time tomorrow. As Sarah rode the subway home with Emma, she couldn't help but smile. For the first time in months, she felt like she was good at something besides just surviving. It was a feeling she'd almost forgotten. By the 3rd day of working together, Sarah and James had fallen into an easy rhythm. Sarah would arrive at the office each morning with Emma and a coffee for both of them. James would update her on any overnight emails or calls, and they would dive into the endless details of planning a charity dinner for 200 people. Sarah discovered she had a natural talent for event planning. She could see problems before they happened and find solutions James would never have thought of. When the florist tried to charge extra for weekend delivery, Sarah negotiated a better rate. When the entertainment canceled last minute, Sarah found a jazz trio that was even better. How did you know to call them? James asked after Sarah booked the jazz trio for half the price of the original entertainment. The waitress at the coffee shop downstairs mentioned her boyfriend plays jazz. I asked for his number, he recommended these guys. Sarah shrugged. Sometimes the best solutions come from talking to regular people. James shook his head in amazement. My assistant would have called an agency and paid 3 times as much. Your assistant probably didn't grow up having to make every dollar stretch. They were sitting in James's office, taking a break while Emma napped in her carrier. Sarah had stopped feeling intimidated by the fancy surroundings and now treated the space like a temporary home base. Can I ask you something personal? James said suddenly. Sure. Emma's father. Is he around? Sarah's expression tightened. No, he's not around. And he never will be. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pry. Sarah looked out the window at the city below. It's okay. It's just not something I like to talk about. Bad breakup. You could say that. Sarah turned back to James. What about you? Ever been married? Almost. 3 years ago. But she decided she wanted someone who would give her more attention than my work did. That must have hurt. It did at the time. But looking back, she was probably right. I was working 18-hour days, traveling constantly. I wasn't really present for the relationship. Sarah studied James's face. Do you regret it? I regret not trying harder. But I don't regret that it ended. We weren't right for each other. James paused. What about you? Do you regret Emma's father? Sarah looked down at her sleeping daughter. I regret trusting him. I regret believing his promises. But I don't regret Emma for 1 second. She's the best thing that ever happened to me. Even though it made your life harder? Especially because it made my life harder. Before Emma, I was just drifting. Working dead-end jobs, not really caring about anything. When she came along, I suddenly had a reason to fight for something better. James was quiet for a long moment. You're an amazing mother, Sarah. Emma's lucky to have you. Thank you. That means a lot. They went back to work, but something had shifted between them. The conversation had created a new level of understanding, and Sarah found herself stealing glances at James as he worked. He was handsome, successful, and kind, everything she'd told herself she couldn't have. Later that afternoon, James's phone rang. Sarah could tell from his side of the conversation that it was business, and it sounded serious. When he hung up, he looked stressed. Problem? Sarah asked. Big problem. I have to fly to Chicago tonight for an emergency meeting. I might not be back until Sunday. Sarah felt a flutter of panic. But the dinner is Friday. That's tomorrow. I know. I'm sorry, Sarah. I hate to leave you with this, but do you think you can handle the final details without me? Sarah looked around the office at all the lists, contracts, and arrangements they'd been working on. The thought of managing a charity dinner for 200 people by herself terrified her, but she also felt a surge of determination. I can do it. Are you sure? I could try to reschedule the meeting. No, don't do that. I've got this. Everything's basically organized anyway. I just need to supervise the setup and make sure everything goes smoothly. James stood up and walked around the desk to where Sarah was sitting. Sarah, I can't tell you how much this means to me. This dinner is important to the company, and I trust you completely. You trust me? Sarah looked up at him in surprise. More than anyone I've worked with in years. You care about getting things right and you don't give up when things get complicated. Sarah felt a warmth spreading through her chest. When was the last time someone had said they trusted her completely? I won't let you down, she said softly. I know you won't. James reached out and touched Sarah's hand briefly, and she felt an electric shock at the contact. For a moment, they just looked at each other, and Sarah was aware that something important was happening between them. Then Emma woke up with a cry, breaking the spell. I should get going, Sarah said, standing up quickly. I want to double-check everything with the caterers tonight. Sarah, wait. James caught her arm gently. When this is all over, when the dinner is finished and my crisis in Chicago is resolved, I want to take you out. A real dinner, just the two of us. Sarah's heart started racing. James? I know what you said before about us being from different worlds, but I think you're wrong. I think we understand each other better than either of us expected. Sarah looked into James's eyes and saw something that made her breath catch. He wasn't just being polite or charitable. He genuinely cared about her. Let me get through tomorrow night first, she said finally. Is that a yes? Sarah picked up Emma and headed for the door. It's a maybe. As she left the office, Sarah's mind was spinning. Was she really considering dating James Mitchell? Was she crazy to think it could work between them? But as she rode the elevator down to the lobby, Sarah realized something had changed in her over the past few days. Working with James, seeing how he treated her as an equal despite their different backgrounds, feeling respected and valued for her intelligence and skills, it had reminded her that she was more than just a struggling single mother. She was a woman with dreams, talents, and the right to be happy. The question was, did she have the courage to reach for that happiness? The charity dinner was a complete success. Sarah arrived at the hotel 2 hours early and supervised every detail, from the flower arrangements to the sound system. When guests started arriving, she stationed herself near the entrance with a clipboard and her most professional smile. Excuse me, are you the event coordinator? Sarah turned to see an elegant older woman in a designer dress looking at her expectantly. Yes, I'm Sarah Johnson. How can I help you? I just wanted to tell you that this is beautifully organized. The flowers are gorgeous and the seating arrangement is perfect. Whoever planned this really knows what they're doing. Sarah felt a surge of pride. Thank you so much. That's very kind of you to say. As the evening progressed, Sarah received similar compliments from other guests. By the time dinner was served, she was feeling confident and proud of what she'd accomplished. James called during the appetizer course. "How's it going?" he asked, and Sarah could hear airport noise in the background. "It's going perfectly. Everyone's having a great time, the food is delicious, and the jazz trio is a huge hit. I knew you could do it. I'm so proud of you." Sarah stepped into the hallway for privacy. "When will you be back?" "Late Sunday night. But Sarah, I want you to know that watching you work this week has been incredible. You're talented, smart, and capable of anything you set your mind to." "James, I know this week is almost over, but I don't want it to end. I don't want us to end." Sarah's heart was pounding. "We're not ending. We're just going back to our normal lives." "What if I don't want to go back to my normal life? What if I want to see where this goes?" Before Sarah could answer, someone called her name from the dining room. There was a problem with the dessert service that needed her attention. "I have to go," she said. "We'll talk when you get back." "Sarah, wait." But she'd already hung up and was rushing back to handle the crisis. By the end of the evening, Sarah was exhausted but exhilarated. The charity dinner had raised more money than expected, and several guests had asked for her business card. She didn't have business cards, but she gave them James's contact information and said they could reach her through his office. Sunday afternoon, James called again. "I'm back in the city. Can I see you?" "I'm at the laundromat with Emma. It's not very glamorous." "I don't care about glamorous. What's the address?" 20 minutes later, James walked into the neighborhood laundromat like he owned the place. He was still wearing his business suit from traveling, but he didn't seem to notice that he was completely overdressed for the surroundings. "Hi," he said, sitting down next to Sarah on the plastic chairs. "Hi yourself. How was Chicago?" "Successful but boring. I kept thinking about you and wondering how the dinner went." Sarah smiled. "It went great. We raised 30% more than last year." "That's amazing. But I already knew it would be successful because you were in charge." Emma was sitting on Sarah's lap, playing with a small toy. When she saw James, she reached toward him with a happy squeal. "I think she remembers you," Sarah said, surprised. James took Emma carefully and bounced her on his knee. "Hey there, beautiful girl. Did you help your mama with the big party?" Watching James with Emma did something to Sarah's heart. Emma's father had never shown any interest in her, had never even held her properly. But here was James, a successful CEO, playing peekaboo with her daughter in a laundromat like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Sarah, I need to tell you something," James said, still playing with Emma. "Okay. This week changed everything for me. Working with you, seeing how you handle challenges, watching you with Emma, it made me realize I've been living my life all wrong." Sarah felt her chest tighten. "What do you mean?" "I've been so focused on building my company and making money that I forgot what I was working for. I forgot about connecting with people, about caring for someone other than myself." "James? I'm in love with you, Sarah." The words hung in the air between them. Sarah stared at James, holding Emma, surrounded by washing machines and the smell of detergent, and felt her world tilt on its axis. "You don't know me well enough to be in love with me," she said finally. "I know that you work harder than anyone I've ever met. I know that you never give up even when things seem impossible. I know that you're an amazing mother who would do anything for her daughter. I know that you're smart, funny, and kind. What else do I need to know?" Sarah felt tears starting to form. "You need to know that I'm scared. You need to know that I've been hurt before and I can't afford to be hurt again. You need to know that Emma and I come as a package deal, and dating a single mother is complicated." "I know all of that. And I don't care about complicated." Sarah took Emma back from James and stood up to check on their laundry. She needed a moment to think, to process what he'd just said. "Sarah, look at me." She turned around to face him. "I know you feel something too. I can see it in the way you look at me, in the way you smiled when I walked in here today." Sarah's defenses crumbled. "Of course I feel something. But feeling something and acting on it are two different things." "Why?" "Because you're rich and I'm poor. Because you live in a penthouse and I live in a studio apartment. Because you eat at fancy restaurants and I eat ramen noodles. Because when people see us together, they're going to think I'm with you for your money." James stood up and walked closer to her. "Do you care what people think?" "Yes, I care. And so should you. Your business associates, your friends, your family, what are they going to think when you show up with a waitress and her baby? They're going to think I'm the luckiest man in the world." Sarah laughed despite herself. "You're impossible." "I'm serious. Sarah, I've dated women who had everything: money, education, social connections. But none of them made me feel the way you do. None of them challenged me or inspired me or made me want to be a better person. James, this is crazy. We've known each other for a week. Sometimes a week is enough to know. James reached out and touched Sarah's face gently. Sometimes you meet someone and you just know they're going to change your life forever. Sarah closed her eyes and leaned into his touch. She wanted to believe him so badly it hurt. She wanted to believe that fairy tales could come true, that love could conquer differences in social class and money. What if it doesn't work? She whispered. What if it does? Sarah opened her eyes and looked at James. Really looked at him. She saw kindness, sincerity, and something that looked like hope. One dinner, she said finally. One dinner? You asked me to dinner. I'm saying yes to one dinner. And then we'll see. James's face broke into a huge smile. Really? Really? But it has to be somewhere I can bring Emma, and it can't be too fancy, and you have to promise me that if this doesn't work out, we can still be friends. Deal. But Sarah? Yes. It's going to work out. As they folded laundry together, Sarah couldn't help but hope that James was right. Maybe, just maybe, she deserved a chance at happiness after all. Their first official date was at a family restaurant in Sarah's neighborhood. James arrived in jeans and a casual shirt, looking completely out of place but trying hard to fit in. Sarah appreciated the effort even if she could tell he was nervous. This is nice, James said, looking around at the busy restaurant filled with families and couples. It's not fancy but the food is good and they don't mind babies, Sarah said, adjusting Emma in her high chair. I don't need fancy. I need time with you. They talked easily over dinner, sharing stories about their childhoods and their dreams. James told Sarah about growing up with parents who were never home, and how he'd started his first business in college to prove he could succeed on his own. Sarah told James about her mother, who had raised her alone and taught her to be independent. She would have liked you, Sarah said, watching James make funny faces at Emma. You think so? She always said the measure of a man was how he treated people who couldn't do anything for him. You're kind to Emma, you're respectful to the waitress. You didn't act like you were too good for this neighborhood. She would have approved. James reached across the table and took Sarah's hand. I want to meet the people who matter to you. Your neighbors, your friends from work, everyone who's part of your life. Sarah felt a flutter of anxiety. James, my life isn't very exciting. It's work and Emma and trying to make ends meet. It's not glamorous. I don't want glamorous. I want real. Over the next 2 weeks, James became part of Sarah's routine. He would pick her up after her shifts, help her with grocery shopping, and play with Emma while Sarah cooked dinner in her tiny kitchen. He met Mrs. Rodriguez and charmed her completely by bringing her flowers and speaking the little Spanish he knew. He even came to the diner during Sarah's lunch shift and left a generous tip that made her boss smile. Sarah found herself falling for James more each day. He was patient with Emma when she was fussy, he listened when Sarah talked about her dreams of going back to school, and he made her laugh in ways she'd forgotten were possible. But she was also waiting for the other shoe to drop. In her experience, things that seemed too good to be true usually were. The test came on a Thursday evening. Sarah was getting ready for her evening shift at the grocery store when James called. Sarah, I need a favor. What kind of favor? There's a business dinner tonight with some important clients. My date canceled at the last minute and I really need someone to come with me. Sarah's stomach dropped. James, I can't. I have to work tonight. Can't you call in sick? I already used my sick days when I worked for you last month. Then quit. Sarah sat down hard on her bed. What did you just say? Quit the grocery store job. You don't need it anymore. I'll take care of you and Emma. Sarah felt like she'd been slapped. James, I can't quit my job. Why not? Sarah, this dinner is important. These clients could make or break a major deal for my company. And I'm sure you'll find someone else to go with you. I don't want someone else. I want you. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to stay calm. James, I understand that your business is important, but so is mine. I can't just drop everything because you need a date. It's not just a date, it's business. And honestly, Sarah, working at a grocery store is beneath you. You're smarter than that. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Beneath me? I didn't mean it like that. I just meant you could do so much more. Those jobs pay my rent, James. They put food on my table and diapers on my baby. They're not beneath me, they're what I do to survive. But you don't have to survive anymore. I can take care of you. Sarah stood up, anger flooding through her. I don't need you to take care of me. I've been taking care of myself and Emma just fine without your help. Sarah, please don't be like this. I'm trying to help you. No, you're trying to change me. You're trying to turn me into someone who drops everything whenever you need something. That's not fair. Isn't it? James, what happens when I quit my jobs and become completely dependent on you? What happens when you decide you're tired of playing house with the poor single mother? That's not going to happen. How do I know that? How do I know you won't get bored and move on to someone more suitable for your world? There was a long silence on the phone. Finally, James spoke and his voice was cold. Fine. Go to work. But don't expect me to wait around while you choose a grocery store over our relationship. If that's how you see it, then maybe this isn't going to work after all. Sarah hung up the phone and immediately burst into tears. Emma, sensing her mother's distress, started crying too. Sarah picked up her daughter and held her close, feeling like her heart was breaking. She'd known this would happen. She'd known that eventually, James would expect her to change her entire life to fit into his world. She'd known that a man like him couldn't really understand what it meant to work 3 jobs just to survive. But knowing it would happen and experiencing it were 2 different things. The pain of losing James felt like losing a part of herself she'd just discovered. Sarah called her boss at the grocery store to confirm she'd be there for her shift, then spent the rest of the evening trying to pretend her heart wasn't broken. She didn't hear from James for 3 days. On Sunday morning there was a knock at her door. Sarah opened it to find James standing in the hallway, looking tired and miserable. "Can we talk?" he asked. Sarah stepped aside to let him in. Emma was napping and the apartment felt too quiet. "I'm sorry," James said immediately. "I was completely wrong." Sarah sat down on her mattress and waited for him to continue. "I spent the last 3 days thinking about what you said and you were right. I was trying to change you, trying to make you fit into my life instead of figuring out how to fit into yours." "James? Let me finish. I went to that business dinner alone, and the whole time I was thinking about how much I'd rather be here with you and Emma. I realized that I've been so used to people doing whatever I want because of my money that I forgot what it means to respect someone's choices." Sarah felt tears starting again. "It's not just about respect, James. It's about understanding that my jobs aren't just jobs to me. They're my independence, my security, my way of taking care of my daughter. I know that now. And I'm sorry I called them beneath you. Nothing that helps you take care of Emma is beneath you." Sarah looked at James sitting on her second-hand chair in his expensive clothes, and she saw something different in his face. He looked humbled, almost vulnerable. "Where does this leave us?" she asked softly. "I don't know. But I know I don't want to lose you. I know I want to learn how to be the kind of man who deserves you." Sarah stood up and walked to the window. Outside, kids were playing in the courtyard while their parents watched from the steps. This was her world, her community, her life. "James, if we're going to try this, you need to understand something. I'm not going to quit my jobs and become some kept woman. I'm not going to change who I am to make your business associates comfortable. And I'm not going to apologize for where I come from or how I live. I wouldn't want you to. Are you sure? Because when push comes to shove, are you going to be proud to introduce me as your girlfriend? Or are you going to be embarrassed that I'm a waitress who lives in a studio apartment?" James stood up and walked over to her. "Sarah, look at me." She turned to face him. "I am proud of you. I'm proud of how hard you work, I'm proud of what a good mother you are, and I'm proud that you're strong enough to call me out when I'm being an idiot." Despite everything, Sarah smiled. "You were being a pretty big idiot. The biggest. So can we try again? Can we figure out how to make this work without me trying to change your entire life?" Sarah looked into James's eyes and saw the man who had played with Emma in the laundromat, who had folded her clothes without complaining, who had made her laugh when she thought she'd forgotten how. "We can try," she said finally. "But James?" "Yes. Next time you have a business dinner, find yourself a proper date. I'll be at work taking care of my responsibilities." James smiled and pulled her into his arms. "Deal." "And Sarah?" "Yes. I love you exactly as you are." As James held her, Sarah felt the broken pieces of her heart starting to heal. Maybe they could make this work. Maybe love really could bridge the gap between their different worlds. But she knew that this test had been important. It had shown both of them what they were really willing to fight for. 2 months later, Sarah and James had found a rhythm that worked for both of them. James had learned to work around Sarah's schedule, and Sarah had learned to let James help in ways that didn't compromise her independence. He would pick up groceries when she was too tired, and she would organize his business dinners when his regular assistant was overwhelmed. But Sarah knew that the real test was still coming. James had been invited to his company's annual gala, and he'd asked her to be his date. This wasn't a quiet dinner in her neighborhood or a casual business meeting. This was James's professional and social world, and Sarah would be meeting the people who mattered most to his career. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," Sarah said, looking at herself in the mirror of the department store dressing room. James had insisted on buying her a dress for the gala, and after much arguing, Sarah had agreed to let him help. "You look beautiful," the saleswoman said. "That dress was made for you." Sarah looked at her reflection and barely recognized herself. The midnight blue dress was elegant and sophisticated, and with her hair styled and makeup done, she looked like she belonged in James's world. But looking the part and feeling the part were two different things. "Sarah?" James called from outside the dressing room. "How's it going in there?" "Fine," Sarah called back, but her voice shook slightly. That evening, James picked up Sarah and Emma from their apartment. Mrs. Rodriguez had agreed to babysit, and she fussed over Sarah like she was her own daughter. "You look like a princess, Mija," Mrs. Rodriguez said, adjusting Sarah's necklace. "I feel like I'm playing dress up," Sarah admitted. "Then play. Sometimes we have to pretend to be brave before we actually feel brave." The gala was being held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and Sarah felt her anxiety spike as their car pulled up to the red carpet entrance. Photographers were taking pictures of the arriving guests, and everyone looked perfectly polished and confident. "I can't do this," Sarah said suddenly. James took her hand. "Yes, you can. And if anyone makes you feel uncomfortable, we'll leave immediately. You can't leave your own company's gala. Watch me." Sarah looked at James and saw that he was completely serious. He would walk away from his own event if she needed him to. "Okay," she said, taking a deep breath. "Let's do this." The museum was transformed into a glittering wonderland. There were flowers everywhere, a full orchestra, and guests in designer gowns and expensive tuxedos. Sarah felt completely out of place, but James stayed close to her side, introducing her proudly to everyone they met. "This is Sarah Johnson," he would say. "She's an event planner and the most talented woman I know." Sarah appreciated that he didn't mention her other jobs or her situation. He presented her as an equal, and most people responded warmly. But not everyone. "James, darling." A woman in a red dress appeared at his side, air-kissing both his cheeks. "I heard you were bringing someone new tonight. Victoria, this is Sarah." Sarah Victoria Hammond. Victoria looked Sarah up and down with barely concealed disdain. "How lovely. And what do you do, Sarah?" "I'm an event planner," Sarah replied, using the introduction James had been making all evening. "Oh, how interesting. Which firm?" Sarah felt her cheeks flush. "I'm freelance." "I see." Victoria's smile was sharp. "Well, freelance can be so unpredictable. James, you should have her call me. My firm is always looking for good help." The word help was delivered with just enough emphasis to make it clear that Victoria saw Sarah as hired staff, not as James's equal. "Actually," James said smoothly, "Sarah just organized our charity dinner last month and raised more money than we've ever raised before. She's incredibly talented." "I'm sure she is." Victoria turned back to Sarah. "Tell me, dear, where did you go to school?" Sarah felt trapped. She could lie, but James knew the truth and would know she was lying. She could tell the truth and face Victoria's judgment. Or she could find a way to change the subject. "I'm actually taking classes now," Sarah said, which was true. She'd enrolled in online business courses. "I believe in continuing education." "How admirable. Well, I'm sure you and James are having fun. These kinds of relationships can be so educational." Sarah felt like she'd been slapped. The implication was clear. Victoria saw Sarah as James's temporary entertainment, not as someone he could have a real relationship with. "Excuse me," Sarah said politely. "I need to find the ladies' room." Sarah escaped to the bathroom and tried to compose herself. She looked at her reflection and saw the same woman she'd seen in the dressing room, but now the dress felt like a costume and the makeup felt like a mask. Another woman entered the bathroom, someone Sarah had been introduced to earlier but whose name she couldn't remember. "Are you okay, dear? You look a bit pale." "I'm fine, thank you." "Don't let Victoria get to you. She's been after James for years, and she's not happy that he's finally found someone who makes him smile." Sarah looked at the woman in surprise. "Really?" "Oh yes. James has been different lately, happier, more relaxed. Everyone's noticed. Victoria's just jealous because she thought she had a chance with him." The woman touched up her lipstick and continued. "For what it's worth, I think you're good for him. I've never seen James look at anyone the way he looks at you." After the woman left, Sarah stayed in the bathroom for a few more minutes, thinking about what she'd said. Was it true that James was happier? Had people really noticed a difference in him? When Sarah returned to the party, she found James talking to a group of his business associates. He saw her approaching and immediately excused himself. "There you are. I was starting to worry. Just needed a moment. James studied her face. Victoria said something to upset you, didn't she? It's fine. No, it's not fine. What did she say? Sarah looked around at the elegant party, at the people in their expensive clothes discussing their expensive lives, and made a decision. She asked where I went to school. She offered me a job as help at her firm. She implied that our relationship was temporary and educational. James's jaw tightened. I'm going to have a word with her. No, don't. That will just make it worse. Sarah, you don't deserve to be treated like that. James, she's not wrong about some things. We are from different worlds. People are going to notice that. I don't care what people notice. Sarah looked at James standing there in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, surrounded by his professional world, and felt the weight of their differences more heavily than ever. But I care, she said quietly. I care because it affects you and it affects us. How does it affect us? Because every time we go to one of your events, I'm going to be the outsider trying to fit in. Every time you come to my world, you're going to be the rich guy who doesn't belong. People are going to judge us, and eventually that's going to wear us down. James was quiet for a long moment. Then he took Sarah's hand and led her to a quieter corner of the party. Sarah, do you love me? The question caught her off guard. What? Do you love me? Because I love you, and if we love each other, then nothing else matters. Sarah felt tears threatening. It's not that simple, James. Why not? Because love doesn't pay the rent. Love doesn't change the fact that I'm a single mother working 3 jobs. Love doesn't make me fit into your world or make you fit into mine. Then we'll create our own world. Sarah laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. That's not how life works. Says who? James pulled out his phone and showed Sarah something that made her gasp. It was a business registration document. What is this? Sarah Johnson Events. I registered it yesterday. You're officially a business owner now. Sarah stared at the document. James, what did you do? I gave you what you've earned. Sarah, you have a gift for event planning. The charity dinner proved that, and tonight proves it too. You should be running your own company, not working 3 jobs just to survive. I can't afford to start a business. You don't need to. I'm your first investor. And your first client. Mitchell Enterprises needs someone to handle all our events, and I want that someone to be you. Sarah felt dizzy. James, this is too much. It's not enough. Sarah, I want to build a life with you. A real life where we're partners in everything. I want to marry you. The words hung in the air between them. Sarah stared at James, hardly believing what she'd heard. You want to what? I want to marry you. I want to adopt Emma and give her my name. I want us to be a family. Sarah felt like the room was spinning. James, we've only been together for 3 months. I've known I wanted to marry you since the night I met you in that coffee shop. That's crazy. Maybe. But it's also true. James got down on one knee right there in the corner of the museum, and Sarah realized he was pulling out a ring box. James, don't. Sarah Johnson, will you marry me? Sarah looked down at James, at the ring he was offering, at the man who wanted to change her entire life. Around them, the party continued, but she felt like they were in their own bubble. I need time to think, she whispered. James stood up and put the ring away. How much time? I don't know. This is all happening so fast. Sarah, I love you. I love Emma. I want to take care of both of you for the rest of my life. And what if you change your mind? What if you wake up one day and realize you've made a mistake? That's not going to happen. How do you know? James took Sarah's face in his hands. Because loving you is the first thing I've ever done that felt completely right. Sarah closed her eyes and leaned into his touch. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to believe that fairy tales could come true. But she was also terrified of what she'd be risking. Can we go home? She asked. I need to see Emma. I need to think. Of course. As they left the gala, Sarah felt like she was walking away from more than just a party. She was walking away from a decision that could change everything. The question was, did she have the courage to take the biggest risk of her life? Sarah didn't sleep that night. She sat by Emma's crib, watching her daughter sleep and thinking about James's proposal. Every time she closed her eyes, she could see him on one knee in the museum, offering her a future she'd never dared to dream of. But she could also hear Victoria's voice, implying that Sarah was just temporary entertainment for James. She could see the looks from some of the other guests, the ones who clearly wondered what a man like James was doing with a woman like her. At 6 a.m, Sarah's phone rang. It was James. Did I wake you? I wasn't sleeping. Neither was I. Sarah, we need to talk. I know. Can I come over? Sarah looked around her tiny apartment, then at herself in her pajamas with her hair messy from a sleepless night. This was who she really was, not the woman in the designer dress from last night. Okay. But James? Yes. Come as yourself too. No suit, no business face. Just you. When James arrived an hour later, he was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, and he looked as tired as Sarah felt. He was carrying coffee and bagels from the place down the street. Peace offering, he said, holding up the bag. They sat at Sarah's small table while Emma played on the floor with her toys. For a few minutes they just ate in comfortable silence. I've been thinking about what you said last night, James said finally. Which part? The part about us being from different worlds. You're right, we are. But Sarah, I don't want to live in my world anymore. Sarah looked at him in surprise. What do you mean? I mean, I hate those parties. I hate the fake conversations and the people who only care about money and status. I hate the way Victoria treated you, and I hate that I've been part of that world for so long that I didn't even notice how toxic it was. James, that's your career. Those people are your business associates. Some of them are, but not all of them. And the ones who matter, the ones who are actually good people, they liked you last night. They saw what I see, a smart, strong, beautiful woman who makes me better. Sarah stirred her coffee and tried to organize her thoughts. James, what you're offering me is incredible. The business, the marriage proposal, the chance to never worry about money again. But I'm scared. Of what? Of losing myself. Of becoming someone I don't recognize. Of Emma growing up thinking that the only way to be happy is to have someone else solve all your problems. James was quiet for a long moment. What if we did it differently? What do you mean? What if instead of me taking care of you, we took care of each other? What if instead of you joining my world, we built a new world together? Sarah looked at James, trying to understand what he was suggesting. I've been thinking about this all night, James continued. I don't want to be the CEO who never sees his family. I don't want to work 18-hour days and miss Emma's first steps or her first words. I want to be present for our life together. But your company? I have excellent people working for me. I can delegate more, travel less, focus on the parts of the business I actually enjoy instead of trying to do everything myself. Sarah felt a flutter of hope, but she was still cautious. And what about me? What about my independence? Sarah Johnson Events is your company. You'll run it however you want. You'll take the clients you want and turn down the ones you don't. I'll be your first investor, but after that, it's all you. What if the business fails? Then you'll start another one. Or you'll go back to event planning for other people. Or you'll do something completely different. The point is, you'll have choices. Sarah picked up Emma, who had crawled over to her chair. And what about us? What about our relationship? What about it? James, last night showed me that there are going to be people who don't think we belong together. People who think I'm with you for your money, or that you're slumming it with me. Are you prepared for that? James reached across the table and took Sarah's free hand. Sarah, do you remember what you told me about your mother? About how the measure of a man is how he treats people who can't do anything for him. Yes. Well, the measure of a relationship is how the people in it treat each other when things get difficult. Last night was difficult and we handled it. You didn't let Victoria intimidate you, and I didn't let her disrespect you. We supported each other. Sarah looked down at their joined hands. It's going to be hard sometimes. Everything worthwhile is hard sometimes. But Sarah, I'd rather have a hard life with you than an easy life without you. Emma babbled and reached for James, and he took her easily, bouncing her on his knee. Watching them together, Sarah felt her last defenses crumble. I love you too, she said quietly. James's face lit up. You do? Of course I do. I've been in love with you since that night in the coffee shop when you offered to buy me coffee and share your cookie. Then what are we waiting for? Sarah took a deep breath. James Mitchell, are you sure you want to marry a woman who works 3 jobs and lives in a studio apartment with a baby? Sarah Johnson, are you sure you want to marry a man who doesn't know how to do laundry and has never changed a diaper? Sarah laughed, and it felt like the first real laugh she'd had in days. I can teach you about diapers. And I can learn about laundry. So is that a yes? Sarah looked at James holding Emma, and she saw their future spreading out before them. It wouldn't be easy and it wouldn't be perfect, but it would be theirs. Yes, she said. It's a yes. James whooped with joy, startling Emma, who began to giggle. He set Emma down and pulled Sarah into his arms, spinning her around the tiny apartment. We're getting married, he said, kissing her. We're getting married, Sarah agreed, kissing him back. Later that morning, they drove to a jewelry store where Sarah could choose her own ring. She picked something simple and elegant, Nothing too flashy or expensive. Are you sure? James asked. You can have anything you want. This is what I want. It's beautiful, but it's not show-offy. It's me. It's perfect. They spent the rest of the day making plans. They would have a small wedding, just close friends and family. James would start delegating more responsibilities at work so he could be home for dinner most nights. Sarah would start her event planning business from home until Emma was older. They would look for a bigger apartment, but nothing too fancy, somewhere Emma could play and they could build a real family life. What about Mrs. Rodriguez? Sarah asked as they walked through the park with Emma. What about her? She's been like a grandmother to Emma. I don't want to move away from her. Then we'll find a place nearby. Or we'll visit all the time. Sarah, I don't want you to lose the people who matter to you. That evening, James had dinner with Sarah and Mrs. Rodriguez in the small apartment. Mrs. Rodriguez grilled James about his intentions, his family, and his ability to take care of Sarah and Emma. You seem like a good man, she said finally. But if you ever hurt my girls, I will find you. I understand, ma'am. And I promise I won't hurt them. See that you don't. After Mrs. Rodriguez left, Sarah and James sat on the mattress with Emma between them, making lists of everything they needed to do for the wedding and the business. I can't believe this is really happening, Sarah said. Believe it? We're going to build something amazing together. James? Yes. Thank you. For what? Sarah looked around her small apartment at the life she'd built from nothing, at the man who loved her exactly as she was, and at the daughter who had given her the strength to reach for more. For seeing me. For believing in me. For loving Emma like she's your own. She's going to be my own. And Sarah, you don't have to thank me for loving you. Loving you is the easiest thing I've ever done. 6 months later, Sarah Johnson became Sarah Mitchell in a small ceremony in Bryant Park, the same place where they'd first met to exchange suitcases. Emma walked down the aisle as the flower girl, scattering petals everywhere and making the guests laugh. Mrs. Rodriguez cried through the entire ceremony. James's parents, who had flown in from California, fell in love with Emma immediately. Sarah's co-workers from all 3 of her former jobs came to celebrate, along with several clients from her new event planning business. You did it, Mija, Mrs. Rodriguez whispered to Sarah as they watched James dance with Emma at the reception. You found your happiness. We all did, Sarah replied, watching her new husband make funny faces at their daughter. Sarah Johnson Events was thriving. Sarah had discovered that she had a real gift for understanding what people wanted and making it happen. Her business was growing through word of mouth, and she was already booked solid for the next 6 months. James had kept his promise to delegate more at work. He was home for dinner most nights and he'd never missed one of Emma's important moments. He'd also become an expert diaper changer and could make Emma laugh harder than anyone else. They'd moved to a larger apartment just 2 blocks away from Mrs. Rodriguez, with a real bedroom for Emma and space for Sarah's home office. It wasn't a penthouse, but it was home. As Sarah danced with her new husband at their wedding reception, she thought about the night everything had changed. A simple suitcase mix-up had led to the greatest love story of her life. What are you thinking about? James whispered in her ear. I'm thinking about how lucky we are that you grabbed the wrong suitcase. I didn't grab the wrong suitcase. Sarah pulled back to look at him. What do you mean? James smiled mischievously. I mean, I saw you at the airport. I saw you struggling with Emma and all your bags, and I thought you were the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. When I realized our suitcases were similar, I might have grabbed yours on purpose. Sarah stared at him in shock. You did not. I did. I figured it would give me a reason to see you again. James Mitchell, are you telling me you stole my suitcase? I'm telling you I fell in love with you at first sight and had to find a way to meet you. Sarah threw back her head and laughed. You're impossible. And you're stuck with me forever. Good, Sarah said, pulling him closer. I like impossible. And I love forever. As they danced under the lights in the park where their love story began, Sarah knew that sometimes the best things in life came from the most unexpected places. A wrong suitcase had led to the right man, the right love, and the right life. And she couldn't wait to see what other beautiful surprises were waiting for them.